Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spilling the Tea on GovCon. I'm Teresa Moon, Director of Business Development for Parabolis. We provide a better financial partnership for government contractors that includes a line of credit to fund your growth. The purpose of this podcast is to assist small businesses with success in the federal marketplace by introducing them to industry experts and resources that they may not otherwise know about. Today, my guest is my friend Elizabeth Sullivan, president of Madison Services Group, a DC-based business that focuses on federal procurement and working on Capitol Hill and with federal agencies to shape acquisition policy for small and mid-sized contractors. I was fortunate enough to meet her through our mutual connection supporting the HubZone Contractors National Council. And I saw very quickly that she and her team are a force to be reckoned with. Welcome, Lizzie. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Wonderful to be here.
Well, thank you. I know that you guys are super busy. We were just talking about it's an election year, so thanks for taking some time with us. But what I always like to start the show off with is some people might not know who you are and what Madison Services Group provides. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a formal introduction, talk about your background, how you got involved in doing the work that you do, and then a brief overview of what you guys do at Madison Services Group.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me. Hi, everyone. So Elizabeth Sullivan, or Lizzie, president of Madison Services Group. As Teresa said, we're a government relations firm focused squarely on small and mid-sized GovCon policy. Really, GovCon nerds in the weeds on Capitol Hill, federal agencies, the administration, really taking a lot of the issues that our clients bring to us and trying to impact meaningful change in the GovCon space. So I got into this role when I started working for this firm 8 years ago with Ann Sullivan, who many of you may know, took over 3 years ago. And as we were working on the business, one of the things that Ann spent a lot of time putting into place was a women-owned small business program. So through that, we really honed our niche. And when I joined, I sat in one meeting, realized I knew nothing about GovCon, and actually went back to school at night at GW Law for government contracts and cybersecurity law for a master's. So that's kind of how I got in the weeds to try and even begin to catch up to people like you, Teresa, and make sure that what we're working on is really impactful for our clients.
And I appreciate you complimenting me like that. However, I defer to you, my friend. That is why you are here. So let us not be confused about that. But what I'd really love to do is focus about what your niche is. And so specifically focusing on small businesses, nonprofits, and support on Capitol Hill. So I know your team is super busy right now. Tell us a little bit about what you guys are working on.
Yeah, oh my goodness. We are in the throes of National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA season. What that is a bill in Congress that's really kind of the last must-pass bill that gets passed every year. I think it's on year 60-something at this point. And if you follow anything in the news, you hear a lot about polarizing and Congress can't get things done. Well, they always get this done because it authorizes everything for the Defense Department. And so with that, as you can imagine, it presents an opportunity to try and get policies changed for things that can go in the kind of industrial base, that impact the industrial base or small businesses. So we've been working on, I'm like putting a mental list in my head, a whole host of, I call them pieces to the puzzle for our clients like the HubZone Council, right, and other organizations to try and chip away at some of the issues that small GovCon firms have been facing. So kind of top of mind for me with the NDAA kind of looming is raising the sole source thresholds. This is something that has been on the docket for quite some time. We've had a lot of companies just say, hey, our contracting officer wanted to be able to sole source us this contract, but it was 10 million or 15 million, and we are beholden to 4.5 million or 7 million for manufacturing over the life of the contract, right? And they just can't do it, and so the opportunity is lost and the money goes to a small business. So right now we're working on raising those thresholds for HubZone, women-owned, service-disabled, veteran-owned, and individual 8A firms. And at the same time, one of the things that actually the Hub Zone Council has really been pushing for, and I think makes a lot of sense kind of in tandem with raising the thresholds, is removing this really arduous requirement called the reasonable expectation in sole source, which is required for veteran, women, and Hub Zone firms and not for 8A firms. One of the things that I think I keep hearing, I keep saying I keep hearing because we were just at that conference, Teresa.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a lot of people, which is my favorite thing, kind of coming to me and saying, hey, here's what I'm experiencing. So that's why I keep repeating it. But one of the things we keep hearing is, hey, 8A sole source works really well. The other program sole source isn't really used. I know even SBA put out on, I think it's datahub.sba.gov or sam.datahub.sba.gov. But they put out the actual data, which was a result of a bill that we worked on and got signed into law that looks at and breaks down the actual sole source awards and set aside awards for each program. And they're pretty minimal, right? When you look at in the broader scheme of things. So one of the pieces there was, what if we remove this reasonable expectation requirement, harmonize the programs in terms of sole source contracting, and increase opportunities for small businesses across the spectrum? That was kind of another thing that we're working on.
Not an easy feat because, as we know, things don't change very quickly with federal procurement. So kudos to you guys for pushing. I know that Madison Services Group was founded on the push and had done many years to put forth effort into establishing the WASB program. And so you definitely learned from the best as a team on how to keep pushing, because results happen as those efforts are put in time and time again and never ceasing. And so kudos to your team for being relentless on it, because that's the only way that we're going to see a difference in it. And I think, bigger allocations and percentages to these different certification groups is fantastic. But to your point, these businesses are hungry and capable of taking on a bigger chunk of that revenue portion of it as well. And so I can't wait to see what results you guys come up with these efforts. So that's exciting. And so we'll have to have you come back as things progress, as we move into the next, year or two with a new administration, or potentially, actually, either way, it's going to be a new administration. So it'll be interesting to see what turns out after the election season. So that's exciting. So at least we'll have more preview of coming attractions.
Well, and it's interesting too, because Congress lasts 2 years, right? And so when that Congress is done, and it coincides, as we said, with the presidential election this year, a new Congress starts. So anything that was not signed into law by the beginning of next year has to be reintroduced, right? So any of the policies, and that's kind of where this fall push is going to come into play. If it looks like a bag under my eyes, it's kind of because Congress is saying, oh, wait, we didn't do this thing and we need to do it before it runs out, because otherwise we literally have to start the entire process over again. If you think back to Schoolhouse Rock and I'm Just a Bill, that's kind of where we're at right now. So I think what's interesting too is our strategy on all of these things. So raising sole source thresholds, changing, putting some teeth in subcontracting, tackling part of the kind of issues with larger vehicles and slots going only to MPJVs, right? All of those things and all of the strategy behind how to make changes, it changes, day to day, month to month, but also Congress to Congress. Is it a new Congress? Are they focused on something else? Well, they're probably not going to be focused on, something from last year. If there's an administration change, right, then that's kind of a huge push for the first 100 days. Or if there isn't, there's some continuity. Or if the House is no longer Republican controlled and Democratic controlled, and the Senate, which is likely to look to be Republican controlled next year, that just changes the dynamics kind of all over the place. And so even in small business government contracting policy changes, that really does actually change our strategy and how we approach things and the stories that we tell, and kind of the engagement there.
Right.
Which certainly keeps us on our toes, to your earlier
I can
point.
imagine. I mean, you guys got to pivot on the fly, and you've got people changing seats too. So even though you've dealt with similar people, it's an election, and people change out and new people come in, and then you've got to pivot to figure out how to address those people and their mission at hand. And I don't envy that side of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and their staff changes all the time. They jump ship. And so you may have had this relationship and someone who is really interested in procurement, and then the next person comes in and they don't care. So you need to find a new champion.
Right.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Wow. Well, kudos to you for being patient, because there's got to be a lot of that behind the process as well. That is not a virtue I was born with. So that's probably why I don't do what you do. So as a procurement expert, what would you say are top 5 things Congress and federal agencies could do to increase the awards that are going to small business?
Yeah, I think of course, I have like a list of 20, but as I said earlier, they're kind of all these pieces to the puzzle, right? Whether it's an individual program change, like things like, I think of the Hub Zone Council price preference applying to task orders, right? That's not to the larger federal agency piece, but it's something that would chip away at a problem seen in that program, right? But I would say writ large, kind of 5 things top of mind. The first 2 are definitely what I just talked about with respect to raising the sole source thresholds and removing that arduous, reasonable expectation requirement from the 3 other programs, creating some harmony there. I'm going to call out, we did a letter that can still be signed on to, since these changes are actually up for consideration in this year's Senate National Defense Authorization Act. That can be found on my LinkedIn page, which I see is being scrolled below. Also on the Hub Zone Council's page, but you can sign on to that letter, and it's really a good place to add your voice. I think we have 200 plus companies, and I think it's something like 15 organizations sign on just to say, hey, these are really important changes, and we're sick of them not getting done, so they need to get done this year. So those are kind of 2 top of mind. I also think people are really sick of hearing me talk about sole source. That includes people in the industry and Congress, so I'm excited to get that done. Another one I would say is around subcontracting. Has gotten a lot of attention recently, both at SBA, the administration started talking about it. We have a client, the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce in Maryland, who really took on this issue back in 2018. And since then, we have tried to figure out how can there be more transparency and accountability in subcontracting, and have come up with some really good solutions. So I think by having more teeth, right, to subcontracting plans and having that accountability by primes, I think that would absolutely increase contract awards to small businesses, because past performance is so important, right? But if you're listed and on a subcontracting plan, the scope is too large and you're not used, that's a waste of your time and everyone's time, right? So that's kind of another hot topic, I would say.
Absolutely. Because you hear that a lot more than anything, is that I got brought into this project and they've utilized me very little to none. So I think a lot of people that are listening today are going to be excited to hear what the results are on that initiative alone.
Absolutely. There's a piece in the NDIA in the Senate, but then there's also a standalone bill in the House that would make how you performed on your subcontracting plan a more important evaluation factor in winning future work. So it's almost the carrot, right, to as the prime to be able to do that. So that's kind of one piece there. I think, another thing that I really think could increase awards to small businesses and address an ongoing issue that we're seeing when smalls are about to bump out of their size standard is for SBA to go back and actually look at their size standards in the context of what the market looks like today. While I appreciate that they have a methodology that you need a PhD to understand, and they're looking at something called a Gini coefficient and, et cetera, I really think that it's time for them to take a look and see, okay, as we have these larger vehicles, as the award size has grown, does it actually make sense that at 151 employees for, I'm thinking of a certain IT industry, now you're competing with the largest companies who are they're global with thousands and thousands of employees? Or is the revenue size standard actually make sense with the margins that are looked at? And the House Small Business Committee did a hearing on this and talked about it back in February. And so I think giving that support and that runway to smalls for growth, right? Isn't that the whole goal, that you grow out of the small business programs, right? You don't have to do weird things to stay small. I think that's a big gap that would then increase awards, because if you're continuing to support smalls, they're not kind of falling off that cliff, right?
Right. No, that's so important. And I think the interaction that you speak of, I know that, a lot of businesses join forces with you all and the different organizations that are serving this pursuit as well, and speak on behalf of other business owners about what the effects of not having these things in place have provided to them being able to do the work that they do, and the cost that it impedes their ability of growth and success in the marketplace. And so this is all really great. And so I think from an advocacy perspective, we've got you out there and groups like yours that are doing things like this. But do federal contractors have a role in advocating for these changes as well?
Absolutely. I mean, the Hill isn't just sitting there. Capitol Hill isn't sitting there just pontificating and coming up with these ideas out of thin air, right? Like, they come from somewhere, and it's people who have a voice and a seat at the table. I think there's so many things you could do, but I would say the kind of the top ones to have a role in things that directly impact your business, right, would get to know your members of Congress, right? They are your members, whether they're Democrat or Republican, or maybe, a splash of independence sometimes in there. But regardless of their party affiliation, they're still your members of Congress, right? Know your representative, know your 2 senators, but know their district offices, right? What's closest to your business. Invite them to your business, right? Because they are way more likely, when their staff knows you, to be able to help you with, I don't know, a problem with a security clearance. I have many member offices that have helped our clients with that, right? Or some other issue you want to bring up to them that you're seeing in your community. If you take the time to know that district office staff, it makes a huge difference, because they report to DC, they report directly to the member of Congress. It doesn't just, fall into a 20-something's ears and go nowhere. There are processes in place to get that information. So I could say that's a huge one. But I also think then, at the same time, federal contractors can get engaged in associations. So obviously you don't want to go maybe be the star of the show of something that might make your customer a little sour at you, right? If you're thinking about that, get engaged in associations like the Hub Zone Council, the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce. We have a women's procurement circle. There are so many industry associations in GovCon. They're kind of the last association group, I think, that is really thriving, because it makes so much sense, whether it's by industry or socioeconomic category, whatever it is. They can put on that advocacy front and take your problems where it's not assigned to you, it's assigned to the larger group. And, we found huge success with that all the time, right? And it kind of protects the federal contractor if it's a very specific issue that you have. And we do that we have individual clients we work with as well, where we do that, where, it's us out front. So it's not something the customer is seeing necessarily, right, with the problem that you're facing. Right. But those associations are really powerful tools as a business owner.
And I mean, we, you and I alike support a lot of these agents or associations that are assisting in this area as well. And we see a lot of these small businesses really, really, really digging their heels in at these events, understanding that side of it, and that them being a part of it is unifying their voice. And so definitely encourage businesses getting involved in an organization that supports either a certification, socioeconomic status that they are working behind, that they can get in there. And that's really how they can get their voices heard. I think a lot of times that businesses are worried about, is it appropriate for them to communicate with Congress? And the reason that they're worried about that is because they're afraid that there might be rules in place, just like there are in speaking to contracting officers about certain aspects of a contract award. They're worried about that. Can you talk about the nuances that go into that? Because everyone's always worried about playing by the rules, because to your point earlier, they don't want to have someone have a sour taste in their mouth about their business because they stepped in it too far, if you will.
Absolutely. And look, we're registered lobbyists. We're a lobbying firm, and there's certain rules around that. But as a business owner, if you're going to your members of Congress, their staff, or the member themselves, and talking about your business and challenges you're seeing, that's not crossing any lines, right? Like being engaged in your associations and doing a Hill Day, where you come into DC, even talking to federal agencies, that's not some type of like lobbying you can't do, right? Lobbying has a very strict IRS definition, and there's definitions with organizations. I think all of the time people think that 501c3s can't lobby, but they actually can. There's just a piece in there of a percentage of the amount of time they can lobby, right? So absolutely, it's appropriate for business owners to communicate with Congress. I will say, I see a lot sometimes of business owners going directly to committee staff, right, who run something like the small business committees and really thinking, with their ear, this will make a change. I do have to say there's a lot of strategy that goes behind policymaking and kind of how we present a message, whether it's, I'm thinking of like the things that I talked about earlier. There was a very strategic message and very strategic people we went to in order to try and get that done. So it might not be the most effective to like go try and look up every committee staffer and run around the hill. I think you're always welcome to. They're very responsive. But I think being targeted with your specific members of Congress who care about you because you are their constituent is such a powerful place. And then your associations will tap you in, right, and say, hey, we're looking for someone who knows this member or can talk about this issue. Mm-hmm. So it's very appropriate. And I get the same question a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big deal, and being able to feel empowered to advocate for yourself is daunting, but it is nonetheless kind of a responsibility that we all have as business owners to really own it and step into it. So I appreciate you calling that out and giving some advice on avenues that are definitely within the realm of what people can do. LinkedIn's a great place to find information about people, reaching out and being able to connect. It doesn't take very long to find out a way to communicate with people and get them to respond back to you. So especially right now when they want your vote.
Can I just say, I've never seen a more active community than the GovCon community on LinkedIn. I mean, I don't know how people have time to do anything else. It's incredible. I need to really step up my game. But also, I will say too, what I did mention was when you're talking to the staff or the member, right, or whoever you're in front of, you're the expert, right? It's your business. It's what you're seeing in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And they're usually, most of the time, very interested in that. So I always tell people, whether they're testifying or even in a meeting, like, you're the expert. So mm-hmm. own it and share that expertise, because otherwise people are going to make policies for you that maybe don't work for your business. So it's really important to have a voice, and you have one.
I think that's great advice, because I think a lot of times people will impose a little bit too much superiority to positions like that. And they think that there's a distance between where they are and where this, member of Congress is, whatever level that they're at, or one of their staff members. And so I think it's important for them to recognize that you're the business owner, you're the expert in your field, and be confident in that. And I think that that's great advice. And so speaking of great advice, we always like to end the show asking for words of wisdom or tips. And you've given some great advice thus far, but if there's one thing that you could tell those of us who are listening and looking for people like you to help them with their next endeavor, what would you say?
I think I definitely say, reach out, be engaged, whether it's on LinkedIn, to your point. I mean, I saw that NASA rolled back SOUP 6 because Carla Jackson Smith at NASA, who's their head procurement person, saw some open letter and comments on LinkedIn, right? It's actually a really powerful platform. So whether mm-hmm. it's through that, associations you work with, reaching out to us, right? Reaching out to your local district staff, really just be engaged, because this is such a unique field where in the policy space, it's bipartisan. We spend a lot of time making sure it's bipartisan, but it's something that people can really wrap their arms around. And I think that's really powerful with kind of all of the noise around divisiveness in Washington and they do nothing. There's a lot that gets done here. It just maybe doesn't get reported on because it's not, as exciting to say when things are bipartisan and signed into law, then things are contentious. So definitely, take that time, be engaged. And my inbox is always available. I'm always really interested to hear kind of what people are seeing, what's bubbling up. So please reach out to me as well.
And you're a business owner as well. So you're right in the fight
I
with
am.
them. So it is definitely as advantageous to you to be on the front lines of it as it is for the clients that you are servicing. And so that's fantastic. And for people who just don't think they have the time to do it, or that they don't think that they're going to be as skilled, Elizabeth and her team are ready to help you. So always, seek her out on LinkedIn. We will share her information as well if you feel inclined to reach out to us about it, because highly recommend. She's doing some great work with some of the organizations that I'm affiliated with. And so we're proud to know you, and we're super proud to have had you on today so you could share a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. And we're going to have you back after election season and see how things may have changed and what you've got ahead in fiscal year 25. So thank you again.
Sounds great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. As always, we pride ourselves on sharing the most insightful and exciting people and information to help you better navigate your GovCon journey. If you like what you heard today, you can see all of our past podcasts, which are archived on our YouTube channel by the same name. Stay tuned for all of our future guests in the coming months as we help you grow to great heights in the year ahead. I'm Teresa Moon, and this is Spilling the Tea on GovCon. Have a great day, my friends.